The rain hammered against the window, a relentless drumbeat that matched the pounding in my chest. I was alone in our cramped Seattle apartment, sprawled on the couch, my phone glowing with a confession I'd typed but never sent. I'm in love with you, Ethan. 3 sentences that could ruin everything. My name is Lucas Carter, 23, a graphic design student at the University of Washington, perpetually broke and perpetually overthinking. Ethan Brooks, my roommate, was everything I wasn't. A 24-year-old engineering major, confident, straight, and effortlessly charming, with a smile that could light up a room. We'd been friends since freshman year, bonded over late-night pizza runs, and shared disdain for our landlord's cheap fixes. But somewhere between the laughter and the quiet moments, I'd fallen for him, hard. That night, February 10th, 2025, I was wrestling with my secret. The apartment smelled of burnt popcorn from my failed attempt at a snack, and the TV flickered with some forgotten sitcom. I was halfway through deleting my unsent message when the door swung open, and Ethan stormed in, soaked from the rain, his blonde hair plastered to his forehead. "Dude, you will not believe the day I've had," he said, shaking water from his jacket. His voice was tight, not the usual easygoing drawl. I shoved my phone under a cushion, heart racing like I'd been caught red-handed. "What's up?" I asked, forcing calm into my voice. He collapsed onto the couch beside me, close enough that I could smell the rain on him, mixed with that faint cedar cologne he always wore. Got into it with my dad again. He's still on my case about settling down with some girl I don't even like. He ran a hand through his wet hair, frustration etched into every line of his face. I'm so done with his expectations. I nodded, unsure what to say. Ethan's dad, a retired military man from Spokane, had a rigid view of what his son's life should be. Good job, nice wife, 2.5 kids. Ethan never seemed to care much for that script, but he didn't outright reject it either. I'd spent months agonizing over whether he'd ever see me the way I saw him, or if I was just setting myself up for heartbreak. "Sorry, man," I said finally. "That sounds rough." He turned to me, his blue eyes searching mine in a way that made my stomach flip. "You ever feel like you're hiding who you really are just to keep the peace?" The question hit like a freight train. I'd come out to my parents at 17, and they'd been supportive, but I'd never told Ethan how I felt about him. I'd never even told him I was gay. It was easier to let him assume I was just a private guy, not dating anyone, than to risk losing him. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "More than you know." He leaned closer, his knee brushing mine. "Tell me." I froze. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. My phone, still tucked under the cushion, seemed to burn with the weight of my unsent confession. I could have laughed it off, changed the subject, but something in his gaze, raw, unguarded, made me reckless. "I'm gay, Ethan," I blurted out. The words hung between us, heavy and irreversible. His eyes widened, but he didn't pull away. My heart was a jackhammer, and I couldn't stop. "And I have been into you for a while. Like, really into you." Silence. The kind that swallows you whole. His face was unreadable, and for a second, I thought I'd just torched our friendship. Then he did something I didn't expect. He laughed. Not cruelly, but softly, like he was surprised at himself. "Lucas," he said, his voice low, "you're gonna kill me." "What?" I braced for the worst. I don't know what to say. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit. I mean, I've never thought about guys like that. But you." He stopped, his eyes locking onto mine again. "You're different. You've always been different." My breath caught. Was he saying what I thought he was saying? Or was I reading too much into it? Before I could ask, he leaned in, his hand grazing my arm, and my world tilted. "I don't know what this means," he whispered, "but I don't want to lose you." The rain outside faded to a distant hum. My heart screamed to close the gap between us, to kiss him and see what happened, but fear held me back. What if this was just a moment? What if he woke up tomorrow and regretted it? Ethan, you don't have to. I started, but he cut me off. I want to figure this out. With you. His hand found mine, tentative but firm, and my chest ached with hope and terror. That night, we didn't kiss. We didn't need to. We talked until 3 a.m. about everything. His dad, my fears, the weight of secrets we'd both been carrying. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy, uncertain, and real. But as I fell asleep on the couch, his hand still in mine, I knew one thing. That night had changed everything. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the weight of Ethan's arm draped over me. We'd fallen asleep on the couch, tangled together like we'd done it 100 times. For a moment, I let myself believe this was normal, that last night's confession hadn't been a dream. But then Ethan stirred, his blue eyes blinking open, and reality crashed in. "Morning," he mumbled, his voice rough with sleep. He didn't pull away, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze, like he was recalibrating who we were to each other. "Morning," I echoed, my mouth dry. I wanted to ask what last night meant to him, but the word stuck. Instead, I slid off the couch, muttering something about needing a shower, and fled to the bathroom. Under the hot water, I replayed every word, every touch. Had I pushed too far? Was he just being kind, humoring me? When I emerged, Ethan was in the kitchen, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. "You okay?" he asked, handing me one. His tone was casual, but his eyes were searching, like he was trying to read me. "Yeah," I lied, taking a sip to avoid his gaze. "You?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just processing." That word, processing, hung over us like a storm cloud. We spent the day tiptoeing around it, sticking to safe topics: classes, the Seahawks game, the leak in our ceiling. But every glance, every accidental brush of his hand against mine, felt like a spark. By evening, I was a mess of hope and dread. That night, we went to a party at our friend Aisha's place in Capitol Hill. The house was packed, music thumping, fairy lights strung across the ceiling. Aisha, a 22-year-old art major with a knack for throwing chaotic bashes, pulled me into a hug the second we arrived. "Lucas, you look like you've seen a ghost," she teased, her dark curls bouncing. "Just tired," I said, forcing a smile. Ethan was already across the room, laughing with some guys from his engineering program. He fit in so easily, while I felt like I was carrying a neon sign that screamed, "I told my straight roommate I love him." Aisha dragged me to the makeshift dance floor, and for a while, I let the music drown out my thoughts. But then I saw Ethan watching me from the corner, his expression unreadable. My heart lurched. Was he jealous? Annoyed? Or was I projecting again? Later, we ended up in Aisha's backyard, sitting on a rickety bench under a string of Edison bulbs. The air was crisp, and Ethan's knee pressed against mine, sending a jolt through me. "So," he said, his voice low, "about last night." I braced myself. "Yeah, I meant what I said. About figuring this out." He looked at me, his face half lit by the bulbs. "But I'm scared, Lucas. I've never felt like this before. Not with anyone." My chest tightened. "You don't have to have it all figured out," I said. "I don't either." He laughed, a nervous edge to it. "That's the problem. I'm supposed to be the guy who's got it together, you know? My dad, my friends, they all expect me to be this straight dude with a perfect life. But you..." He paused, his hand brushing mine. "You make me question everything." I wanted to kiss him right there, under the glow of those stupid lights, but a shout from inside broke the moment. Aisha was calling us back for a drinking game. Ethan stood, offering me his hand. "Come on," he said, a shy smile tugging at his lips. "Let's go be idiots together." The rest of the night was a blur of laughter and cheap beer, but that moment in the backyard stayed with me. It was the first time I let myself believe Ethan might feel something real for me. Not just friendship, not just curiosity, but something deeper. Back at the apartment, we collapsed onto the couch again, buzzed and giddy. Ethan was closer than he needed to be, his shoulder pressed against mine. "Lucas," he said, his voice soft. "I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I don't want to stop." Before I could respond, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine. It wasn't a movie star kiss. It was hesitant, clumsy, real. My heart exploded, and for those few seconds, the world was just us. But the next morning, everything changed. I woke to an empty couch and a text from Ethan. "Needed to clear my head. Be back later." My stomach dropped. Last night's kiss replayed in my mind. His lips, his warmth, the way he'd looked at me like I was the only person in the world. Now he was gone, and doubt crept in like a thief. I spent the morning pacing our apartment, replaying every moment since my confession. Had I pushed him too far? Was he freaking out? By noon, I was a wreck, my phone silent despite the dozen texts I drafted and deleted. When Ethan finally walked in, his face was a mask. "We need to talk," he said, his voice flat. He sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped, avoiding my eyes. "Okay," I said, my throat tight. "What's going on?" He took a deep breath. "Last night it was real. I felt something. But I don't know if I'm ready for this. For us." His words were a punch to the gut. My whole life, I've been one thing. Straight. Certain. And now I don't know who I am. I wanted to scream that he didn't need to know, that we could figure it out together. But his expression, lost, almost haunted, stopped me. "Ethan," I said softly, "you don't have to decide everything right now." "I know," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "But I need time. To think. To be sure." I nodded, even though it felt like my heart was cracking. "Take all the time you need." For the next week, we were ghosts in our own apartment. Ethan threw himself into school, staying late at the engineering lab. I buried myself in design projects, sketching until my hands cramped. We still ate breakfast together, but the easy banter was gone, replaced by polite small talk. Every time our eyes met, I saw the same question in his. "What are we doing?" Then came the call from his dad. I overheard it one evening, Ethan's voice rising from his room. "No, Dad, I'm not dating her. I don't want that life." A pause, then, quieter. "I don't know what I want." When he emerged, his face was pale, his jaw tight. "He's coming to visit," Ethan said, slumping onto the couch. "This weekend. Wants to check in on me." I winced. "You gonna tell him about us?" He laughed bitterly. "There's no us, Lucas. Not yet. Maybe not ever." The words stung, but I saw the fear behind them. Ethan wasn't just fighting his feelings for me. He was fighting a lifetime of expectations. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him it was okay to be scared, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "Whatever happens, I'm here." His dad's visit was a disaster. Mr. Brooks was all booming voice and firm handshakes, filling our tiny apartment with his presence. He talked about Ethan's future, grad school, a job at Boeing, a nice girl. I woke to an empty couch and a text from Ethan. "Needed to clear my head. Be back later." My stomach dropped. Last night's kiss replayed in my mind. His lips, his warmth, the way he'd looked at me like I was the only person in the world. Now he was gone, and doubt crept in like a thief. I spent the morning pacing our apartment, replaying every moment since my confession. Had I pushed him too far? Was he freaking out? By noon, I was a wreck, my phone silent despite the dozen texts I drafted and deleted. When Ethan finally walked in, his face was a mask. "We need to talk," he said, his voice flat. He sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped, avoiding my eyes. "Okay," I said, my throat tight. "What's going on?" He took a deep breath. Last night it was real. I felt something. But I don't know if I'm ready for this. For us. His words were a punch to the gut. My whole life, I've been one thing. Straight. Certain. And now I don't know who I am. I wanted to scream that he didn't need to know, that we could figure it out together. But his expression, lost, almost haunted, stopped me. Ethan, I said softly, you don't have to decide everything right now. I know, he said, finally meeting my eyes. But I need time. To think. To be sure. I nodded, even though it felt like my heart was cracking. Take all the time you need. For the next week, we were ghosts in our own apartment. Ethan threw himself into school, staying late at the engineering lab. I buried myself in design projects, sketching until my hands cramped. We still ate breakfast together, but the easy banter was gone, replaced by polite small talk. Every time our eyes met, I saw the same question in his. What are we doing? Then came the call from his dad. I overheard it one evening, Ethan's voice rising from his room. No, Dad, I'm not dating her. I don't want that life. A pause, then, quieter. I don't know what I want. When he emerged, his face was pale, his jaw tight. He's coming to visit, Ethan said, slumping onto the couch. This weekend. Wants to check in on me. I winced. You gonna tell him about us? He laughed bitterly. There's no us, Lucas. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The words stung, but I saw the fear behind them. Ethan wasn't just fighting his feelings for me. He was fighting a lifetime of expectations. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him it was okay to be scared, but I didn't. Instead, I said, whatever happens, I'm here. His dad's visit was a disaster. Mr. Brooks was all booming voice and firm handshakes, filling our tiny apartment with his presence. He talked about Ethan's future, grad school, a job at Boeing, a nice girl named Sarah he'd met at church. Ethan sat there, nodding, his shoulders hunched like he was carrying the weight of the world. I stayed in my room, pretending to work, but every word felt like a nail in the coffin of whatever we'd started. At dinner, things unraveled. Mr. Brooks brought up Sarah again, and Ethan snapped. I'm not marrying her, Dad. Stop pushing. The room went silent. I was in the kitchen, grabbing a glass of water, and I froze, caught in the crossfire. You need to grow up, Ethan, his dad said, his voice low and sharp. You can't keep running from responsibility. I'm not running, Ethan shot back. I'm trying to figure out who I am. His dad scoffed. You're my son. You're a Brooks. That's who you are. Ethan's chair scraped as he stood. Maybe I'm more than that. He stormed out, slamming the door. Mr. Brooks left shortly after, muttering about kids these days. I found Ethan on the fire escape, staring at the Seattle skyline, his breath visible in the cold night air. He doesn't get it, Ethan said without looking at me. He doesn't get me. I sat beside him, our shoulders brushing. He doesn't have to. You do. He turned to me, his eyes raw. What if I'm not who he wants? What if I'm not who I thought I was? Then you're someone new, I said. And that's okay. He reached for my hand, his fingers cold but steady. I don't want to hurt you, Lucas. But I'm scared I will. My heart ached, but I squeezed his hand. I'm scared too. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. For the first time in days, he smiled. A real, unguarded smile. You're too good for me, you know that. I laughed, my chest loosening. Nah, we're just a couple of idiots figuring it out. That night, we didn't kiss again. But we sat there, hands intertwined, watching the city lights until the cold drove us inside. It wasn't a promise, but it was a start. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. Ethan and I didn't label what we were, but we were something, more than roommates, more than friends. We'd steal moments, a brush of hands while cooking dinner, a shared look that said more than words could. But the shadow of his dad's expectations loomed, and Ethan's fear of disappointing him kept us from crossing that final line. One night, Aisha invited us to a queer art showcase in Pioneer Square. The gallery was packed with vibrant paintings and sculptures, each piece raw with emotion. Ethan wandered off to look at a canvas of two men embracing, their silhouettes blurred into a burst of color. I watched him, his face soft and thoughtful, and my heart swelled. "You okay?" I asked, joining him. He nodded, his eyes still on the painting. "It feels like us. Messy, but beautiful." I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. "You think we're beautiful?" He turned to me, his smile shy but certain. "Yeah, Lucas. I do." That night, back at the apartment, everything changed. We were on the couch, a movie playing in the background, when Ethan turned to me. "I'm done being scared," he said. His voice was steady, his blue eyes locked on mine. "I want this. I want you." Before I could process, he kissed me. Deep, deliberate, like he'd been holding back for years. My world narrowed to the warmth of his lips, the strength of his hands pulling me closer. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise. But promises are fragile. The next day, Ethan got a call from his dad, demanding he come home to Spokane for a family meeting. Ethan went, and when he returned, he was quiet, distant. "He knows," he said finally, sitting at our kitchen table. "About us." My stomach dropped. "How?" I told him. Ethan's voice was hollow. I couldn't keep lying. He didn't take it well. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. He said I'm throwing my life away, that I'm confused, that I need to fix this. He laughed, a broken sound. "He thinks you're the problem." Anger flared in my chest. "I'm not making you do anything, Ethan." "I know," he said quickly, "but he's my dad. He's all I've got." I wanted to argue, to tell him he had me, but the words felt selfish. Instead, I said, "What do you want to do?" He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "I don't know. I just need time." Time. That word again. I nodded, but inside, I was breaking. For the next few days, Ethan was a shadow, slipping in and out of the apartment like he was afraid to stay too long. I threw myself into my art, sketching him in every line, every curve, trying to hold on to what we'd had. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late, the rain pounding again, when Ethan burst through the door, his eyes wild. "I'm done," he said, his voice shaking. "I'm done trying to be who he wants." I stood, heart pounding. "What happened?" "I told him I'm in love with you," he said, the words spilling out. "And I'm not sorry. I'm not ashamed. I'm scared, but I'm not going back." I crossed the room in 2 steps, pulling him into my arms. He clung to me, his breath ragged, and I felt the weight of his choice, the courage it took to choose himself, to choose us. "I love you too," I whispered, my voice breaking. We didn't have all the answers. His dad might never come around. Our friends might not understand. But that night, as we held each other, I knew we'd face it together. Love wasn't a cure for everything. It was messy, terrifying, and worth every second. Years later, I'd look back on that night and see it for what it was, the moment we chose to be brave. Ethan and I built a life, not perfect, but ours. And every time I saw him smile, I remembered the rain, the confession, and the night that still burned in my memory.